All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Matthew Mickey from the Daily Profile, and today we will be doing wargaming for Thursday, November 6th. So sharing my screen, right out the gate, we can see we went long, right? And one thing I want to talk about overnight, like all the overnight distros, which are derived from the last 16 Tuesdays, so the quarters Tuesdays, um, overspent. And so we do have a possibility of overspending the 10-day median range and the New York 1 distro, right? So first and foremost, the P12 signature overnight was contradicting, right? Meaning Asia sold, London and Frankfurt bought, right? We can also see that between 6 to 9, the first quarter of the 12-hour, we could not make it back to the P12 mid, and we stepped above P12 high. So we're trying to see from a 12-hour approach, are we going to go check mark MAE to MFB to the downside? And is that reversal going to happen between 8:30 and 9:30 when it typically happens, right? So now looking at what we've done from a New York 1 perspective, right? We can see that the 7:30 to 8:30 range box, like we moved up, so we went long out of it. So let's pull up the probabilities of what that actually gives us for where targets can be for the downside, right? We're definitely tracking that we are inside of New York or previous day footprint, the high wick near previous day high. So if we start getting rejection, we're just rejecting that daily wick, right? We can see with long, based off of what Asia and London has done, right? We can see that when we break long, we can expect 67% of the days to go false, meaning, right? We go up and then down, right? We do that more times than we go straight up by 11:30, right? So we can select false, right? And starting with that scenario, we're going to start putting probabilities on stuff. We can see that we typically put a high of the day between 8:30 and 9:45. And if that's the case, if we do put the high of the day in, we expect the low of the day to be end of day. So when you see goalposts like this, you expect high day, low day, and a contradicting overnight market. You expect both of these to happen after the RTH, right? We can see the mode to median for the high of the day is from 0.2 to 0.6 off the Globex open. So we're going to come over here to our indicator, long false. We're going to put 0.2 to 0.6, right? And then another point that is unique today is that we can either make the low of the day between 10 to 10:15 to like 11:30, and then make a new high of the day end of day, or we're going to make the high of the day to make the low of the day at the end of the day, right? So we're going to account for both, and we're just going to put 8:30 to 1600 to give us a constant reminder as we're going up to those levels. That's what we're expecting, right? And then we're going to do the same thing for the low of the day, right? So we're going to put 0.4 to 0.8. We're going to go 10:15 to end of day, right? So we know we don't have a time edge as much in this kind of scenario, and that we're going to really have to trust the major pivot that comes out of New York 1, right? And then the low of the day is from 0.4 to 0.87. We'll just round that up to 0.9 and let that be that, right? So then now, looking at this, if this scenario is to play out, right, do we have enough distro to go New York 1 can go here, but I selected the wrong one, right? This is our 10-day median range. I'm just move this over to the side. And we can see that we have enough 10-day median distro to go from higher day zone to lower day zone, right? Now, we don't have enough distro to go all the way. It would be abnormal to come touch previous day low today because we've already spent most of our distro. And so it's more realistic to expect previous day high and then for us to get to previous day mid, and that be our range for today, right? So in this scenario, right, we want to see what the highest because remember, we're doing all this for the 7:30 to 11:30 time frame, and then we use the 11:30 to 1600 to grab the other side of the extreme. So in the first part of the morning, right, you're waiting for the high of the day or the low of the day to be playing it, so you know when you are in the body of the daily candle, and then the afternoon session is to take you to the other side of the extreme, right? And so you can line up your trades with the color of the body of the daily candle. We see under this scenario, which is a higher probability scenario, that our price action should reflect like this. We make that major pivot somewhere in here between 9:30 and 10:30, or even now, because we saw the high day data being supported at 8:30 to 8:45, and then we start heading lower. We can expect 10 o'clock quarters to play out and even 11 o'clock quarters to play out, and that would take us into the New York 2 session. So now we're going to look at the other possible scenario, right? Because there's only two possible scenarios that can play out now between 9:30 and 11. And that is if we just do a straight line up and we cannot make it to the other side of this 7:30 to 8:30 range by 11:30, right? And we will know, and we'll talk about how we can identify that after we get the probabilities of it, right? Before I go into that scenario, I do need to back up and get probabilities for targets. So we know that that Asia OU has been broken, and London OU right here has not been broken, right? So this is a target, and P12 mid is a target, right? Looking at the false scenario, we can see that London gets hit 79% of the time, majority of the time between 9:45 and 10. So by like, let's say 10:15, we haven't hit it. That's no longer a target. That 76.9 is not a probability that we're going to be targeting. And then we can see the P12 mid has a 92% probability. It either got hit between 6 and 8:30, or it's going to get hit between 9:30 and 10:15, right? So we will be targeting London OU and P12 mid today once we get sells, right? We can see that midnight open gets retraced majority of the time under this scenario by 9:30. 9:30 is the mode. Same with Globex open, and that settlement has a higher than normal probability of getting filled today, right? The one thing that we have to pay attention to is once we start selling back into the range, do we bounce from P12 mid to make a new end of day high of the day, or do we go to London OU, make a new low of the day around 10:15 to 11, and then make a new high of the day, right, to bounce, right? Because remember, our high of the day data, and I messed that all up. Let me go back over here. Our high of the day data for this scenario, right, showed us that we can make high of day or low of the day, and we've only moved 200 handles. It's only 200 handles to the downside. We definitely have the distro for the morning session to sell, make a new low of the day, and then make a new high of the day by the end of the day. So we cannot dismiss and expect everything to be a sell from here, right? All right, so now let's go into the true scenario, right? Going back to the profiler, going back to here, right? Remember what we just talked about happens 67% of the day. So 2 to 3 times of the week out of a 5-day trading range, 32% of the time we do the extend all the way up, right? And we can see if that's the case, we have a lot of data pointing to 3 to 4 o'clock low of the day, or even a lot of the data to support where our current low of the day is, which is at 2025, 8 o'clock, 8:30 last night. And then from a price standpoint, 0.3 to 0.6. So we've hit that. We hit 0.47, and we saw the data does. So that would support us coming and bouncing off the P12 high and continuing higher for this lower probability scenario where we just between 9:30 and 11:30 continue heading up, right? But we know that only happens 32% of the time, right? So if that happens, then we know our high of the day is going to happen more towards the end of the day because we didn't range extreme overnight. We don't expect a morning one, right? And we know that that high of the day data for a long true, right, is between 0.5 to 1% to the upside off of Globex opening. So let's go put that in there. And then we expect end of day high of day, right? And this low of the day supports it. So can we have the distro to support that right now? And you can see we do, right? So the signature that and then we expect this kind of price action and all those high probabilities of the downside go away. This kind of price action shows strong moves out of the 930 to the upside, and then continuation at 10, deep retracement at 1030, range until 1130, and then we'll see if the afternoon wants to keep pushing us higher. So more of a DWP style. All right, so now let's talk about how we determine the two possible scenarios, the long true versus the long false. Right, we will use the 9 o'clock hour as it sits, right, as it's being developed, right, and the 930, right. This is going to represent your 930 1-minute candle, right. Right, and we have 4 steps that we use. Now 930 to 945 can come up, make the high, and then reverse on us, right? Or we can just sell out of the 930 like this. But either way, if we get below 930, that's step 1 of a 4-step to confirm this major pivot, because we don't want to fight daily momentum, which is up, 12-hour momentum, which is up, 3-hour momentum, which is up, hourly momentum, which is up. So step 1 is get below 930. Step 2 is get below 9 o'clock's 50% wherever it lies. Step 3, 10 o'clock takes out 9 o'clock's low and makes step 4 makes it in statistic high for quarter 1 of 10 o'clock. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to wait for these 4 steps to trade off of that information, but you won't confirm this high as being the high of the day until those 4 steps go. Because if you get this right, then you have the rest of the day to know your job is to sell the rips. Right? So trade ideas, right? Once we turn this thing false and get below 930, I will take sells with extended cash flow and targets around P12 mid, London OU. If we continue going up, the 930 to 944 trade that I take will be normal position size, normal target as I teach. And then to the upside, let's say 10, we don't get that 4-step reversal that we just talked about. 10 o'clock 05 boxes, normal position, and then all trend models that I have that happen after 10 o'clock will be turned on with normal position size. All right, so hopefully this helped. Later, haters.